right. Thank you. All right, so now we're starting on the book of Daniel. And we're doing so by reading that first sentence, which places this event at this time period in Israel's life. So let me just spread out though what happens before this. So just roughly think about the people entering the promised land, and then the book of Judges, and all of that conquest being before 1000 BC. And then King David and Solomon around 1000 BC type of thing. And then you get into the split up of the nation. So the nation is before David, or really, I guess you could say Saul was in there, but with Saul going by the wayside and David becoming king and being anointed as king by Samuel, you've got a nation now. Before it was a confederated group of tribes. And remember, they said, we want a king like everybody else, because they were still fighting and not doing well, and they wanted to have centralized government. No, they didn't say that. So the battle between the states and the feds began long ago. Sorry. But it is kind of that way. So David centralizes things. He brings the Ark of the Covenant to Jerusalem, makes it the capital, and you've got a unified nation, but yet you still have the states, the tribes, and their territories. And then Solomon comes along, and Solomon really, through all kinds of allegiances with other foreign nations, really gets things pretty well set. And there's a lot of different opinions about what Solomon did scripturally. The book of Chronicles holds him up as, you know, this great king, but in First and Second Kings, you get, well, he made all these allegiances, he had all these foreign wives, you know, he put a lot of people to work and almost slavery, this type of thing. But his son, one of his successors, there's a famous spot where the tensions between the northern tribes and the southern tribes, and then the southern tribes are just two, Benjamin and Judah, all the others are the northern tribes. But you've got basically, you know, a united Israel, and then, well, I can go to the map here. So really, in this time, we're talking about Israel expand, you know, being roughly in this area during King David and Solomon. And these are all broken up into different tribes. And Judah really is most of the area about halfway between the Sea of Galilee, which is right here, and Jerusalem. So this is going to be the southern, somewhere in here would be kind of the border between Judah, what became known as Judah, and Israel. And so Israel, it used to all be one, but when they split up, because of tensions and whatnot, you get two kingdoms, a divided kingdom. And this kingdom has a place of worship up here in the north, and this place keeps Jerusalem, of course, as its place of worship. So most people believe the Old Testament is written from the perspective of the southern kingdom. It's more favorable to the southern kingdom and whatnot. You know, that's Bible historians kind of doing their best look at things. What I want to tell you is that one of the successors to Solomon, when it was a united kingdom, had the chance to keep it united, and he got great counsel from his elders. Did he listen? No. He listened to the young advisors, and they said just stick it to the north. They'll come around. And he did, and the north rebelled and said we're done. So see there, all of us with people have such wisdom. The younger people, they don't listen. And that king did not listen, and the kingdom split up. So that happens, and then Assyria, if we back up here, way back here, way back. So Assyria in the I'm just giving you rough dates because you don't care, right? You know, the 700s, you know, so the like 720s in there. Assyria is the main world dominant force. But of course, who do we have down here? What's this? It's right there. Egypt. Egypt is always a world power during this time, but it ebbs and flows about how dominant they were when it comes to what's going on here in this land and Assyria and Babylon. This is, of course, where the Tigris and Euphrates River are. I'll show you some more stuff on that in a minute, but just remember, this is really important just from a historical geographical standpoint. If this is a world power and this is a world power, who's right in between? The Holy Land. Where's the trade route? Right through here. Goes right over the top of the Sea of Galilee and on up in, because this is what? Desert. You don't go from here to here. You got to go up here and down. Okay, so the Assyrians in the early 700s come down, and what do? They wipe out the northern tribes. They are gone. They are destroyed. You hear stuff of, you know, if you go to the those little A&E Bible, you know, history, you know, whatever those History Channel things, the lost tribes, you know. What's going to happen to when are they going to come back and all of this type of thing? Well, they get carried. The Syrians, when they conquered people, they took them and they did similar to what the Babylonians did, but the Assyrians are just wipe people out. And so the northern kingdom tribes tend to disappear. So at the time of Daniel, we're getting to Daniel, right? At the time of Daniel, now there's no northern kingdom, there's just the southern kingdom. And Egypt is battling it out with another world power that has defeated the Assyrians, and that is the Babylonians. The famous king of the Babylonians is Nebuchadnezzar. And so we hear about a battle, and we have this recording not just from the Bible, but from Babylonian, you know, historical stuff. In 609 BC, Necho II of Egypt and Josiah of Judah team up to fight the Babylonians, because the Babylonians are coming down now. They are coming down to conquer. And so they kind of join up with Egypt to fight these guys. And in a battle at Megiddo, which is one of the oldest archaeological sites in the world, it looks like a mountain if you go there, because it's just been one civilization after another. And it's all human created. And it's just amazing. But you've got Mount Carmel right in here. This is a very beautiful area of Israel, very fertile, much you know, wetter, and so they have this big battle, but Nebuchadnezzar wins and wipes out Josiah and Egypt. And so what we see happening over here, the third reign of King Jeroboam of Judah, King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon came to Jerusalem and besieged. The Lord let King Jehoiakim of Judah fall into his power, as well as some of the vessels of the house of God. These he brought to the land of Shinar and placed the vessels in the treasury of his God. So Nebuchadnezzar at this point, they haven't destroyed Jerusalem yet, but in essence, they've won the battle. I don't think it's till like 580 something that Jerusalem is actually falls and is wiped out completely. So when King Nebuchadnezzar has this victory, then what happens at that point is the Babylonians, they were quite crafty in the way they conquered. I think this is a little different than what the Greeks would do. Alexander the Great would conquer and he'd give them Greek literature and Greek civilization, and he Hellenized the whole world as such. The Babylonians would take all the powerful people, all the educated people, all the leaders, take the pastors, get them out of there, take the teachers, and they would take them to Babylon and kind of do a re-education. And so guess what happens to our famous character, Daniel? Daniel's one of the folks that gets taken and sent off to Babylon. And that is the whole premise of the book at this stage. So there's the history. Like I say, a little bit later, Judah will rebel one last time against Babylon, and Babylon will come in and wipe Judah out and destroy the temple, the first temple, the Temple of Solomon, and take people off into exile. And that's the famous exile you hear about in the first part of Isaiah and whatnot. Okay, questions about the historical setting of the book of Daniel at this point?
We know when the book was written.
Great question, Ross. So, do we know when the book was written? The answer, in it, if we want to be specific, is no. Now, your Bible stuff in your study Bibles will tell you some dates. If it was written when it happened, then you go back to, 500 BC. And you say, okay, so someone wrote it down, or Daniel wrote it down, or Moses, of course, Moses couldn't have written that part. Moses gets attributed with the first 5 books of the Bible in particular, but that Daniel wrote it down to write about his things, but we don't know exactly who wrote it. And many people traditionally have believed that Daniel wrote it, and then the prophecies that we hear about in the second half of the book of Daniel were indeed just that. Things that were going to happen 300 years later, when the Greeks get in charge. So now, of course, a lot of modern historical critical scholars are going to say it was written much later about this character, Daniel. Or some might even say it had 2 origins, that it had the first part and the second part, and they were put together at some point.
Like Isaiah.
Like a little bit like Isaiah, where you've got the first 39 chapters for the most part are pre-exile, and the middle part is, while exile is going on, and it gets brought together. Again, these are all guesses. I can tell you that from a manuscript standpoint, Daniel is firmly in the Greek Old Testament, which is 200 BC. And it's also, the interesting thing about Daniel is there's versions that are Aramaic. So Aramaic is a form of Hebrew, but it splits off. It's the same, so you wouldn't be able to notice the difference. It's the same consonants. It's the same alphabet almost, but it's a different language. And so we've got some of that going on as well. So, and everybody tries to go back and figure it all out, and it's a guessing game. But yeah, please, yeah.
I was just gonna say, my study Bible says that Jesus referred to the abomination that causes desolation spoken of through the prophet Daniel. So they're saying that Jesus concluded that it was Daniel that wrote at least that part.
Yeah. And we'll get to that part. So Jesus quotes Daniel and that the prophet Daniel is talking about. So Jesus' assumption was that, you know, Daniel wrote the book, which I think is a fine and good assumption. Who am I to disagree with Jesus?
What about those who don't have study Bibles?
Yeah, exactly. You're fine. That's why you come to this Bible study, so you can hear different perspectives. You know, this is gonna be something we can touch on now, and then we'll keep reading. When you think about really what you're faced with Daniel is, did Daniel prophesy something exactly that happened 300 years later? Or is this a different kind of literature, an apocalyptic literature, the second part? And it just really depends on your assumptions. For me, fortunately, the interpretation of the book doesn't ride on it so much. I definitely think that we want to hold things lightly when it comes to some of these decisions about when it was written and when it wasn't. But if you're someone that struggles with, you know, how could this happen, or how can, you know, then maybe the modern historical critical views of it make sense. But if you're not, for me, it's like, I got no problems with Daniel predicting the future 300 years later. But anyway, so we'll wrestle with that as we go. I'm hemming and hawing here a little bit, but there are different views on this, so yeah. Questions? Let me see what else I've forgotten to tell you as an introduction here.
I have.
Let's see. Do that. Share that with you. All right, let's see what else I forgot here.
Hey, Pastor Bill,
Yes,
thank you. May I just read something real quick and see if
sure.
it's just a quick 2 paragraphs in my Bible. The 77s are divided into 3 sections, 7 weeks, 62 weeks, and 1 week. Each week represents 7 years. The decree of our taxes was in 446 to 445 BC, Nehemiah 2:1. The first 2 sections of weeks total 69 weeks or 483 years. This period ended in AD 32 when the Messiah was cut off, 926. I'm not sure which passage that's referring to. I didn't get a chance to look. Or when Jesus was crucified on Calvary. The abomination of desolation, which Daniel prophesied would be part of the 70th week, was clearly dated by Jesus being part of the Great Tribulation or end time period, Matthew 24:15. Nearly 2,000 years have passed and the 70th week has not happened. We are still living in the parenthetical time called the times of the Gentile, which precedes that cumulative prophetic week, which I'm assuming is when enemies here and Jesus comes and all that. So I thought that was interesting. I don't know if you have any comments on that or. If that was a good
I
relative.
think we will delve into that more when we get to that apocalyptic section.
Oh, okay.
But most of my training and my scholars would say that the abomination that's talked about was when Antiochus Epiphanes set up a temple to Zeus in the temple. And provoked the Maccabean revolt, which is the story of Hanukkah, that was the desolation spoken about by Daniel.
Oh,
Christians have went in and said, wait, no, that wasn't it. He was talking about the destruction of the temple by the Romans, and then this other weeks. And so that's where we get into this, which is the same issue we have in Revelation. What do we do with this symbolic language? the weeks, the times, the days. And so that's, once we get there, we'll try and work with that more precisely, but that is the trick, is that event about what happened under Antiochus Epiphanes and the, 180, I forget the exact date, but it's 180s, I think, or 870 something, BC, where the Greeks now, remember Alexander the Great? So right now, look at this, look what we got. We're gonna start reading, because I don't want your brains to just go flying off the thing. So we've got the Assyrians, the Babylonians, and this is the Babylonians. Nebuchadnezzar comes in and he's gonna wipe out the southern kingdom as well, but Daniel gets swept away before that total destruction happens. And so the Babylonians are in charge, but then who comes later? When the people are in exile, we hear in Isaiah that Cyrus of Persia is almost going to be the savior. He's not an Israelite either, but God's going to use him. How's he going to use him? He's going to come and wipe out the Babylonians. So the Persians, they come and wipe out the Babylonians. And what he said is, you guys can go home. You guys can go home. So for 50 years they were in Babylon, and now they get to go back home. But of course, what does home look like? Ugh, looks like LA. I mean, it looks,
like LA.
well, after, maybe I should have said that. The fires, think about the fires. It's devastating. The Babylonians burnt everything. They destroyed the city. There's nothing there. And they have to go back and rebuild. So they take from the 500s to the 200s a long time to rebuild. They rebuild the temple eventually. They rebuild the wall around Jerusalem, and they rebuild Jerusalem. But they are not independent. They kind of are, but they kind of aren't, because the Greeks now are in charge. Do you remember a guy that comes along after the wipes out the Persians? Because these are Alexander he comes and he wipes out the Persians. And of course, he brings in Greek thought. And so Alexander the Great conquers the world. He brings Hellenism everywhere, including the Holy Land. And Israel exists under the Greek rule for hundreds of years. And then somebody comes along and beats out the Greeks. Who was that? The Romans. Now, before the Romans win, just like, what was it? Like, I think they take over the Holy Land in like 60 AD or something. But before that happens, after Alexander the Great dies, he splits up the world and his kingdom into 4 sections. And I think they were 4 I don't remember exactly. And so the Holy Land as we know it, or Israel as we know it, is under the domain of this leader called Antiochus. And what season are we in right now? Epiphany. He added to his name Epiphany. Antiochus Epiphanes the 4th. In other words, he is a revelation of God. Well, Antiochus doesn't like the Jewish people at all. And he sets up worship to Zeus in their rebuilt temple in Jerusalem. Most historical scholars think that was the real context of when Daniel was written. Because it's a polemic against the Greeks. Hang on, God's coming, believe, don't give up, So there you go. There's the history that we're looking at. Please, Sharon, and then we'll actually.
Well, kind of in a nutshell,
Yeah.
it seems like that, picture of the desolation and all that is a repeated episode in small places as it goes through. It keeps going on, it keeps repeating. And I just have the kind of thought that what Jesus is talking about when we get to that part, that's the huge thing that we can't imagine. Someday, whenever. But up until then, we can see how governments rise and fall, concert,
Yeah.
destroy, go in, rebuild. So it's a constant episode.
It is, and that's gonna go on until the,
Yeah.
the final day.
Yeah.
And I think the question that Christians have wrestled with historically then is the kingdom of Christ gonna involve governments and temples and buildings and cities? My interpretation of what Jesus said is that no, only, not until the new heaven and the new earth come. Until then, Jesus's kingdom comes through the preaching of the word, through the ministry of the gospel. And you're gonna always have the civil kingdom and the kingdom of Christ kind of, moving along. So I don't look, for instance, for Israel to be rebuilt or the temple to be rebuilt. It's a part of God's saving history. The gifts and the call of God are irrevocable, so the Jewish people are always got the apple of God's eye, and nothing changes that. But as far as the actual physical nation of Israel, as important as it is, and I think it is important, is to me not part of biblical saving history. But for many Christians, and in many of your study Bibles, it is. Hal Lindsey, you know about him? Wrote a book called The Late Great Planet Earth. And he looked at Jesus's words, and when Jesus said all these things will happen before this generation passes away, he marked the start of the nation of Israel, which was started by the United Nations, as the time clock. The clock started ticking one generation after that. And so he had this all set up. So Jesus is gonna come again in that time period. But of course, he was wrong. Although he would probably come back and say, well, I was right, but I just missed it by a few years or something. I don't know. But the point, the more important thing is he sees that now that God isn't finished with the actual nation of Israel. I'm not talking about the people. Talking about the nation, about the temple. Do you know that there are Christian Zionists who have raised millions of dollars and bought all the stuff to go into the temple in Jerusalem when it's rebuilt on the Temple Mount, which would of course what? Start a what?
Start a war.
It would start a huge world, probably war between Muslims because that's their holy site. You'd have to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque and if you read, so, but they want that. Because they see that as biblical prophecy. So, and this is where we're gonna get into what you do with apocalyptic literature. And I just think we have to have a lot of caution around that. But we also need to be aware of it. So maybe I shouldn't have gone down that long train or that path. But these are the things that are gonna come up as we study this book. They come up when you look at the book of Revelation. But even before we get there, more importantly perhaps, is what is the book really trying to do for the original hearers of it? What was there? That's why I think putting the book's context in the time of Antiochus Epiphanes is helpful, because it helps it make sense to me. Pastoral, like what is this book trying to do for God's people? Or you posit this book in the exile time in Babylon. Well, it's helpful there too, because, man, how do you have faith in a time when everybody else believes something different? Now that can preach, that we need that help, We're in this country now, still in, we're not anything like what's in Europe or in, other places. But our culture is growing less supportive of religious commitment and the Christian church. I think that might be safe to say. How do we live in an exile situation? Christians love the book of Daniel for this reason, because when the church started in Rome, were they in power? Were they the people calling the shots? No, they were persecuted. Now, it wasn't constant, but there were times of severe persecution, but they were certainly looked down upon, and they were not a recognized religion by the Roman Empire. Judaism was, they said, fine, if you Jewish folks want to worship, fine. You pay your taxes and be good citizens, we will leave you alone. And of course, you know, that's, so Christians in First Peter are called resident what? Aliens. In First Peter, because,
Yeah, they're called aliens.
yes, that's right. Because they were living in a culture that was completely, had a different set of values, had a different orientation. So how do we live as resident aliens? These are all questions. All right, let me finish the introduction and then let's get back to reading. So what is the theme? God is sovereign over all human kingdoms. Human kingdoms come and go, like Sharon was saying, but God continues. So here you go, written by Daniel according to tradition, 535 BC, though later dates have been proposed. Here's a little bit better map. This is where Judah is, Tigris, Euphrates River, Babylon, Susa. So this is of course the area of Iraq and Iran today, and this type of thing. So here's Daniel and his friends are taken into exile. Nebuchadnezzar has a dream, which is what the first part of the book we're going to see. Daniel sees visions of the four beasts that are going to get picked up in Revelation. And, you know, again, what do we do with these visions and this apocalyptic literature? You know, and we get the 70 weeks and the throne in the lion's den now, much later. Daniel sees his final vision. So we're looking at this kind of, you know, you still have to have Daniel living quite a long time, which is fine. So, so really the book is in two sections. You've got 1 through 6:28, which is his experience living in Babylon. And then we get to the more apocalyptic, although there's in chapter 2, there's some of the apocalyptic stuff comes into play pretty quickly, but Daniel's visions of the future events. So there you go. That's the outline of the book, and that's where we're gonna go. And let's get back to the text and let's get back to reading. Is everybody totally confused? I hope not.
We just got the history of Israel in 1.
You got the history of Israel 101. There you go. I hope I did it justice. All right, so he besieges the Lord, let King Jehoiakim of Judah fall into his power. So again, what's the book saying? Even though Nebuchadnezzar is doing his thing, God's the one who's ultimately in control. When it comes to Israel, because remember, God has said, I'm gonna, this nation, this family, now this nation, I'm gonna use to be a blessing to all people.
Amen.
That at the time, that is what Israel was for and what would happen. Of course, we believe Jesus is the one who fulfills that. So, all right, then the king commanded his palace master Ashpenaz to bring some of the Israelites of the royal family and oh, we don't want to go over this though. He took stuff from the temple. Did he take the Ark of the Covenant? Is that when it disappeared? Is that when it disappeared? We don't know. Sorry, I just thought I'd throw that in. But he takes some of the stuff. The king commanded his palace master Ashpenaz to bring some of the Israelites of the royal family and of the nobility. So who did the Babylonians take? Royal family, nobility, leadership, aristocracy, you know, the folks that kind of held things together. Then the king, so brought young men without physical defect and handsome, versed in every branch of wisdom. So, okay, these are the very educated folks, right? Endowed with knowledge and insight and competent to serve in the king's palace. They were to be taught the literature and language of the Chaldeans, it's the Babylonians. So you see the re-education thing here? The king assigned them a daily portion of the royal rations of food and wine. Wow, these folks are not gonna be languishing barely in survival mode like the rest of the exiles, like the rest of the conquered people. They're gonna be in the king's palace and they're gonna have some good stuff to eat. I wonder what kind of wine they had. Was it red or white? You know, I'm sure there must have been a good Cabernet in there. Pagan pig. Hey, you know, that'd be a tough one to pass up. They were to be educated for 3 years, so that at the end of that time, they could be stationed in the king's court. This is actually a smart strategy. Among them were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah from the tribe of Judah. How many tribes are left when they go into exile? Benjamin and Judah. But Benjamin was just a little guy, little tribe.
I don't know.
Little. Just 2 tribes, and so these 4 were from the tribe of Judah. You know, that's where the term Jews come from. So Judah, Jews. I like the term Judeans better, given the history and stuff, but nonetheless, that's important that they're from the tribe of Judah. I did have someone, by the way, just when we went to Israel last, say, so do people in Israel like trace their heritage back to different tribes and stuff? And you hear some of that, but mostly, well, so they're from Judah. That's their historical heritage. They're from the tribe of Judah, but anyway, I know some are trying to fine tune that and work that in. Okay, so we've got these 4 Jewish guys, really educated, really smart, really wise, and they're gonna go to school for 3 years and then they're gonna be in the king's court. All right, well, that sounds not horrible, but okay. So Daniel resolved that he would not defile himself with royal rations of food and wine. Okay, so remember I said, how do you live in a land that worships other gods? How do you do that? This is gonna be a part of the instruction of the book. So Daniel says, I don't want your great food and your, Cabernet. I don't want the Malbec or whatever. Which is your favorite red wine? Sorry, I'm thinking about wine. So he asked the palace master to allow him not to defile himself. So it's possible that these foods were not kosher either. So maybe there was pork, maybe there was, stuff that, maybe there was bacon. Sorry, I don't know why I'm trying to be so funny today. All right.
There is a footnote in every study Bible
Yeah.
that says that the Israelites considered food from Nebuchadnezzar's table to be contaminated because the first portion of it was offered to idols.
Yeah,
Likewise, a portion of the wine was poured out on a pagan altar.
yeah. So the food was dedicated to their god. And it is possible that some of it was against the Levitical code.
Yeah, no, I was just-
Kimberly, yeah.
I was just agreeing. I was.
Yeah, you're agreeing.
I was getting
You're
excited.
saying amen to that, yeah.
Thanks to my life.
Fine line that Daniel and you had to follow here.
Yeah,
They're in a foreign land and the foreign lands can go in and go smush them anytime they want.
right,
So they gotta stay on their good side, but at the same time, they can't be too rebellious,
right.
It's a very fine
It's a
line.
fine line.
Over time.
I think that's well said, Bob. I think that's what we're gonna wrestle with. And I can't help to chime on to your comment, Bob, and say that jump ahead 600 years to the time of Jesus, or probably more like 700 years when you get to about 70 AD, but the group of folks that rebelled against Rome during Jesus's time were called zealots. And they weren't interested in the fine line. They just said, no way, no, we cannot exist under your rule. Now, Josephus, the great Jewish historian, who kind of switched allegiances and threw in his lot with the Romans, he remained Jewish, but he said, you know whose fault all this is? And the second temple was destroyed by the Romans, and you got Masada, and there were other revolts, and Rome lost legions of people fighting the Jewish revolts. And the Jewish people were dispersed, and the Holy Land was destroyed, and Josephus says it's the Zealots' fault. Because they didn't need to rebel. They could have worshiped God. The Jewish people would still have their temple. They would still have their territory if we'd have just been okay with the Romans. So that's what Josephus, who tells us, he's really our main source for what happened during this time. So when you said the fine line, Josephus would have said, yeah, look, he kept his laws, but he didn't try and kill the king, and that, so yeah, that's interesting. So we'll keep wrestling with that tension as we go on. So now God allowed Daniel to receive favor and compassion from the palace master. So the palace master said to Daniel, I'm afraid of my lord and king. He has appointed your food and your drink. If he should see you in a poorer condition than the other young men of your own age, you would endanger my head with the king. What's the problem here? The king doesn't want to see starving looking people in his court. So Howard, I don't care what you eat, the guy says, but you gotta be healthy. You gotta be healthy. Well, what does Daniel say? Then Daniel asked the guard whom the palace master had appointed over Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, please test your servants for 10 days. Let us be given vegetables to eat and water to drink. You can then compare our appearance with the appearance of young men who eat the royal rations and deal with your servants according to what you observe.
Mediterranean diet.
The Mediterranean diet. Well, this is just vegetables. Mediterranean diet has some really good, lamb and all that. But yeah. A lot of people go back and say, see, eat your vegetables. But no, a lot of people go back and say, what was that diet? There must be something sacred or holy about that. I don't know, maybe there is.
There should be a caveat here saying you don't try this at home.
Don't try it. I don't know, Paul, I'm thinking, I maybe need to, I'm always in trouble working on my dietary eating habits. Too much dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Too much, of course, that's good for you, right? A little bit. All things in moderation. Okay, so Daniel says, look, we'll be fine, just give us, I don't want all that rich food and that, stuff. I get dedicated to your gods and this type of thing. So he agreed to the proposal and tested them for 10 days. At the end of the 10 days, it was observed that they appeared better and fatter than all the young men who had been eating the royal rations. So the guard continued to withdraw their royal rations and the wine they were to drink and gave them vegetables. Is this the Hebrew word for? So the word here is seed, offspring, descendant, seeds, vegetables, okay? Yeah. Plant-based stuff.
King James says pulse.
Pulse?
Pulse.
Pulse.
I just read about that earlier.
Like pulse?
Spelled
Huh. That'd be fun to look that up and see what the etymology of that word pulse is.
Pulses might be beans.
Could be beans.
We have some of that growing in their garden and they look like succulents. And they're very high in certain minerals and whatnot.
Yeah. So. I've heard the story from our more recent history where the slaves were given the water that the vegetables were boiled in. And they didn't get to eat the vegetables, but all the minerals went into the water, they're cooking it. They did just fine. Because, so that was a good irony. And so, you hear these folks are the ones, but is the point what they were eating?
What about apple juice?
Yes, what about apple juice? You gotta have apple juice.
Pastor Bill,
I think the point here is that it was, it's stuff grown from the earth, it's plant-based food the word in Hebrew is seed, so like vegetable seed, so, in other words, it wasn't, and it wasn't animal-based, yeah, please.
oh, she was showing me something.
Yeah.
Go ahead
Yeah.
first. Go ahead.
Yeah.
It's a legume.
Plant-based, yeah, so there's all kinds of beans and lentils and.
Beans, lentils, all of that, yeah.
See, we both just read about that on, we don't even know how. Two
Yeah.
different,
Really?
somewhere,
Just-
yeah. What I wanted to comment on or say, it's now just gone out of my head. Oh darn. Oh, so yesterday we had Hoppin' John's,
Yes,
Hearty Meals crew, holla.
right,
And that had collard greens. And I was saying to the table I sat at, that the liquid after you cook the collard greens, down south, they call that pot liquor.
Yeah.
And it's like the gold, and so I was telling.
Oh, wow.
She knew it already, that's
Wow.
where the vitamins are, that you
Really good.
want that, don't throw that away.
Oh, wow, yeah, there you go.
Kinda.
I try to roast my vegetables, I don't wanna use them. But, okay, so, my brother would not like this, cause he said, I only eat stuff that eats vegetables. All right, there you go, that's my brother for you, okay. So, he would have had trouble. To these four young men, God gave knowledge and skill in every aspect of literature and wisdom. Daniel also had insight into all visions. So God, I think the point is, whether it's vegetables or, the point isn't what they were eating, it's that God gave them strength and made them prosper in this very difficult time. And gave them wisdom and insight, visions and dreams. This reminds me of a passage that we didn't skip over it, but, the boy temple and and what is it? Jesus increased in wisdom and in years and in divine and human favor. Just kind of sounds like that a little bit. Again, God, God is the one who's doing this and preserving Daniel and giving him gifts and abilities in this situation. All right, questions, comments? Like you said, yeah.
Why were these four so apart?
The best that I get from the text here is that they were already really smart, really educated. They had a lot going for them, and so the conquering Babylonians said, hey, those are people from the royal court, we can do something with them.
We're gonna use them.
We're gonna use them, we're gonna, get them on our side. And educate them and give them good food and,
Plus changing their nature.
and they're gonna get the name change here, yeah.
But they also came from other cultures, other countries, so they can learn from that.
Yes, right. Yeah, it's kind of, I don't wanna say it's completely this for Bury, because I don't know if you know for sure, but. A nation that wants to prosper goes and gets the best people possible.
Like we did with.
Yeah.
Right, right, yeah, it's true. The scientists and a lot of the folks that came, yeah, no, good, yeah. All right, well, let's keep going. And then I think we'll get the first chapter done. And at the end of the time that the king had set for them to be brought in, the palace master brought them into the presence of Nebuchadnezzar. Oh my goodness, right before him. Take care, Barb, bye, Rebecca. Yeah. or Kimberly, sorry.
What was that, I'm sorry?
I just said goodbye, yeah, have,
Yeah.
yeah. Thanks for being
They're
here.
closed now, that we
Yeah.
don't miss anything.
So, drum roll. They're before King Nebuchadnezzar, and the king spoke with them. Among them all, no one was found to compare with Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Therefore, they were stationed in the king's court. So they passed the test. They were impressive. They had a lot of merit. They had a lot of clarity. And they had that because God blessed them in that sense. In every matter of wisdom and understanding concerning which the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and all the enchanters in his whole kingdom. And Daniel continued there until the first year of King Cyrus. So that is interesting. So let's get until the first year of King Cyrus. That's intriguing to me. Let's see here.
Mine says he ruled from 539 to 530.
539 to 530. So there's different Cyruses, I think. Persian emperor and founder of the Achaemenid dynasty. There you go, 59 through 30. His name occurs 22 times in the Bible, in the books of Daniel, Ezra, 1st, 2nd Chronicles. Extra biblical evidence comes from the classical Greek authors, Herodotus, etc., as well, uniform. The latter returned Cyrus' ancestor, or Cyrus' grandfather named So there's other Cyruses, because I was like, wait, there's the Cyrus of Persia that's coming up here, it's different. So anyway, so that's what I wanted to know there. I didn't want to get my Cyruses. So,
So this is not the Cyrus of the Persian Empire that.
correct. That is correct. How did I?
Is Cyrus, is that Cyrus still, is he in Babylonia or is he in Persia?
So Cyrus of Persia is coming in the 520s. So this is a Cyrus the first, I guess, who rules, like you said, from 530 to 539 to 530. I'm not helping you. And Daniel continued there until the first year of King Cyrus. So Nebuchadnezzar's in charge, and now the first year of Cyrus. So, and we read in this that, let's see, where is my Bible dictionary? Here, that this Cyrus II.
My Bible says it's 539 for the first Cyrus, and that Daniel lived to 537 and saw the return to Israel.
Yeah, so Persian emperor and founder of the dynasty. Oh, this is. Sorry, I'm totally confused now. The Persian emperor and founder of the Achaemenid dynasty. His name occurs, etc. Cyrus's grandfather was named Cyrus the First. His father. So this Cyrus up here is not the Cyrus that we're talking about right now. We're talking about.
Why not?
Sure, you can tell we got that.
Yes.
Took them a couple of years to get out of it.
Cyrus is therefore known to moderns as Cyrus II.
I have a note saying this particular Cyrus II was also known as Cyrus the Great. And he conquered the Babylons who were ruling over his Judah in 539.
Gotcha. So he's a Chaldean, probably. Yeah, so, okay, but this is a different Cyrus than the Cyrus of Persia we hear about later, right?
Why do you say that?
Because that happened later, I thought.
Well, I think this is just saying Daniel's gonna stay there until 5:39. It's not, I don't, the way I read it, it's not,
Okay.
it's
Oh,
not in order of happening. It's just saying that he
so,
got there, he stayed there.
Thank
until
you.
Cyrus took over.
It's saying
Then it
Cyrus
goes back to
remains
start
there
talking
until
about this
539.
experience.
So this is in the.
so not King Cyrus of Babylon, but this is King Cyrus of Persia, when he came and he conquered.
Well,
Okay,
that's the way I read it, but.
yeah, I think you're right. Sorry, I was horrible at math. All right, so Daniel continues there. So he's in the trusted position of power, even though he's a foreigner. Yeah,
The good news says Daniel and his whole kingdom remained at the royal court until Cyrus the emperor of Persia conquered Babylon.
no, okay, there you go. So that is the Cyrus that I know so well. All right. Well, let's keep going. In the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, so now we're backing up, Nebuchadnezzar dreamed such dreams that his spirit was troubled and his sleep left him. So the king commanded that the magicians and the enchanters and the sorcerers and the Chaldeans be summoned to tell the king his dreams. When they came and stood before the king, he said to them, I have had such a dream that my spirit is troubled by the desire to understand it. The Chaldeans said to the king in Aramaic, O king, live forever. That's interesting. What's this about? The text from this point to the end of chapter 7 is in Aramaic. So again, that's a manuscript thing, that the manuscripts, that the oldest manuscript that we have of Daniel changes to Aramaic. So at this point, O king, live forever. Tell your servants the dream, and we will reveal the interpretation. And the king answered the Chaldeans, this is the public decree. If you do not tell me both the dream and its interpretation, you shall be torn limb from limb, and your houses shall be laid in ruins. Whoa, no pressure. But if you do tell me the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts and rewards and great honor. So there's a rather,
No pressure.
yeah,
You don't make it up.
therefore, yeah. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. They answered a second time, let the king first tell his servants the dream, then we can give its interpretation. The king answered, I know a certainty that you are trying to gain time, because you see I have firmly decreed. If you do not tell me the dream, there is but one verdict for you. You have agreed to speak lying and misleading words to me until things take a turn. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation. So the king is saying, if you're such a wise person, you should know what dream we have. That seems like a high bar. The Chaldeans answered the king, there is no one on earth who can reveal what the king demands. In fact, no king, however great and powerful, has ever yeah, Daniel, yeah, that's right. Has ever asked such a thing of any magician or enchanter or Chaldean. The thing that the king is asking is too difficult, and no one can reveal it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with mortals.
We're talking back to the king also.
Because of this, the king flew into violent rage and commanded that all the wise men of Babylon be destroyed.
Boy.
The decree was issued, and the wise men were about to be executed, and they looked for Daniel and his companions to execute them. So now they're going to go to Daniel and his companions to kill all the wise folks. Am I reading that right?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Ally, thank you. Yeah.
No.
Then Daniel responded with prudence and discretion to Arioch, the king's chief executioner, who had gone out to execute the wise men of Babylon. He asked Arioch, the royal official, why is the decree of the king so urgent? Ariarch then explained the matter to Daniel. So Daniel went in and requested that the king give him time, and he would tell the king the interpretation. So Daniel now is looking out for the welfare of the idolatrous competition. Isn't he? Couldn't he have said, oh, good riddance, yeah, get rid of him? I don't think he does that.
But they would get rid of him too, because.
So,
Did they see him as part of it, is a question, do you think? Yeah, it seems like Daniel is not being in the same group as the Chaldeans and the magicians and the sorcerers.
What's verse 13 say?
Verse 13. The decree was issued and the wise men were about to be executed. And they looked for Daniel and his companions to execute them. So that Daniel was in the same law.
Yeah.
Okay,
didn't think of Daniel as a god.
not yet,
Oh, yeah.
no. So Daniel and his companions were in the same lot.
Yeah.
The king's gonna wipe them all out, okay.
The king wasn't very wise to wipe out all his wise men.
Yeah. Sounds like, yeah. Interesting. Then Daniel went to his home and informed his companions Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, and told them to seek mercy from God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that Daniel and his companions with the rest of the wise men of Babylon might not perish. So, yeah, they are trying to save their own necks, but also the necks of the wise men of Babylon. Then the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision of the night, and Daniel blessed the God of heaven. And then he goes on. So where we've got to now is that the king set a high bar, not just like when Joseph, remember Joseph was in prison and the cupbearer said, oh, there's this guy down in prison, he's good at interpreting dreams. So Joseph he told the dream and then Joseph explains it. Well, this guy isn't even going to tell anybody the dream. He expects divine revelation. You should know if you're in touch with the gods or God, what my vision was. And that is a very high bar, but God, I think, is going to meet it. And he gives Daniel the vision of what he had. And then we're going to get this lovely little, psalm of thanksgiving and praise that Daniel's going to say because he was given the vision. And that's where we'll pick up next week. Daniel giving Nebuchadnezzar the scoop. Okay, let's finish this way. How do we live in a foreign culture that worships other gods? What did we learn so far? Well, don't write everybody off. Look for the welfare of those around you. That's an interesting thought to chew on, and we meet again next week. All right. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah.